ballots, but if you don't, they are at a stack near Trudy, so please grab one. Okay. So hopefully that's a sign that we are good to go. Thank you for coming to the lay delegate presentation. I am your lay delegate, John Morris. My pronouns are he and him. We switch to the next slide, please. So this seems like a lot of long agenda there. We're going to try to get through this very, very quickly. Next slide. So first things first, I like to tell you what the lay delegate role is because that's kind of my first duty is to tell you what the lay delegate does. Absolutely. Okay. Okay. So I serve a 3-year term and I'm elected after the previous general conference. I serve as the official representative for the congregation to all levels of the denomination, specifically at general conferences and network meetings and gatherings. I ensure that information from the denomination and the network is passed to the congregation in a timely fashion. And I also vote on behalf of the congregation in the lay house of the denomination of general conference there. I do have an official email, so especially to our viewers online, if you need to give me any feedback on what we talk about today there, please feel free to email me. My email address is laydelegate@ppmcc.org. Next slide, please. The general conference we hold every 3 years. It was originally the business meeting was held at the same time at the same location, and all voting members needed to be physically present. However, with rising costs of travel and difficulties with passing through customs and other things there, it was becoming more and more apparent that it was becoming cost prohibitive and impractical to get all voting members physically present in the same place. And so starting in 2019, they started experimenting with virtual voting. In 2022, because of the pandemic, we held it all virtually. And then in 2025, they kept the general conference and the business meeting separated, and the business meeting will be held virtually. They'll be on May 31st when we have a forum to discuss the matters, and then June 7th will be the official meeting with virtual voting starting on the 9th. So please keep that in mind. I am open to all feedback up until I have to actually go to the meeting on June 7th. The general conference itself is July 3rd to 6th in Scottsdale, Arizona there. They are still allowing people to register and everything else there, so I'm sure if you want a last-minute trip to Scottsdale, Arizona in July, to feel free to sign up for that. Okay, next slide, please. So I want to quickly go over the UFMCC structure because it will help give a lot of these amendments their place there. UFMCC stands for United Fellowship of Metropolitan Community Churches. This is very simplified, but we have a moderator. Current moderator is Reverend Elder Cecilia Eggleston. We have a governing board. This is analogous to our board of directors. They kind of handle the finances and the general business decisions. There are 4 clergy members and 4 lay members who get elected for 6-year terms, and every general conference, half the governing board gets reelected. And then the board of elders, they are there to handle spiritual guidance. The elders are appointed by the moderator, confirmed by the governing board there, and the general conference. Elders are mostly clergy, but maybe lay members, and there are no set number of elders. Next slide. For legislative purposes, we have 2 legislative houses. We have the clergy house, which is where ordained clergy and retired clergy are part of, and they get to vote as part of that house. So, and then there is the lay house, which is lay delegates, interim pastors who are not clergy, as well as elders who aren't clergy or are serving as a lay delegate role. Basically, if you're not clergy, but you're still serving an important role, you end up in the lay house. Yes. As of right now, they do not. There was a bylaw amendment proposed 3 years ago that ended up getting withdrawn due to feedback from the general membership, and they have not yet readdressed that. So right now, those particular elders who are lay people do not have a vote at the moment. Um, all House members discuss businesses in joint meeting, but vote in separate houses, and anything gets passed must be passed by, generally speaking, a majority in both houses. So that's what you need to be aware of there. Next slide, please. So the voting process. On June 9th there, virtual voting will open for 24 hours. That's when the ballots will go out. Everybody who's eligible to vote will vote. If needed, a second round may happen on June 11th, and a third round may happen on June 13th. That is generally used for candidate elections to ensure that we elect candidates if nobody gets the appropriate level at the start there. With the pool that we have currently, it will be surprising if we need additional rounds. Bylaws amendments will require 2/3 vote in each house to pass. All other things such as motions require simple majority. Candidates for the governing board and for the moderator must be each elected by more than 50%. And so it is possible that if a candidate doesn't get that majority, and after the 3 rounds of voting, they still haven't gotten it, they don't get elected. And so even though we will be presenting a set of candidates there, we don't have to vote for both of them or one or all of them. Generally speaking, the additional rounds there are run if we don't reach that. If more than 2 candidates are running, the lowest vote candidate will also get eliminated for the next round there so that we can focus our votes. Okay, so that is the process. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Next slide, please. So the first bylaw amendment is changing Article 3, Part B there, which just states initially that each local church shall establish the percentage of members required for transaction of business, the process for notifying members of the meeting, and the process for calling special meetings unless otherwise indicated by the UFMCC bylaws. That is what the article says right now. Next slide will show the additional text that's going to be put in. A little hard to read, so I will read it to you. This is addressing electronic and absentee voting there. So electronic voting, local churches have the flexibility to establish policies and procedures for allowing electronic voting for those who are unable to meet on site. An established method of recording and tabulating such votes is required. For absentee voting, for local church meetings in accordance with local bylaws and with due regard to local and national law, any eligible voting member who are unable to be present either online or on site may be eligible for eligible agenda items by following the established policy regarding absentee ballot guidelines. And then part 2 says proxy voting, no form of proxy voting shall be allowed. So if we slip to the next slide here, what this is doing is it's adding language to allow for virtual voting at the local level. It wasn't expressly forbidden, but because of the pandemic, there were many churches who were uncertain if they were allowed to. And at the time, many adopted it under the idea of it's necessary to transact business. But now that we're no longer in the pandemic there, we can't argue that it's necessary anymore. And so the UFMCC wanted to add the language to say if a church chooses, they can adopt these practices and outline policies. We actually, a few years ago, added a policy to our own bylaws allowing for virtual voting. The person must be present in the live stream and be attending in real time, but they could vote through that process. We do not allow absentee voting or proxy voting in our own bylaws. And so this just reaffirms the idea that you can use these methods. And so the rationale is focusing on that there have been changes in how people go to church. We have, many churches have noticed, like our own, that we have members who happily log in every Sunday there and watch from wherever they are. Some people are actively watching even from a geographic location that's far away from here. And we want to make it that if they choose to take membership in our church, if they choose to actively participate, they are not forbidden from it. Proxy voting is generally defined as assigning somebody else to vote in your place. So you would fill out a contract saying, for example, if I was doing it there and and Reverend Charles was not able to be there, he could sign a form that says, John Morris can vote on my behalf, and so my vote would in essence count twice, once for me and once for him. So that is still forbidden. It's still one vote per person. Are there any other questions about this amendment? And that I am in agreement with that. Okay, so let's move on to the next amendment. So this one needs a little bit of explaining. It is adjusting Article 3A and Article 3B. Article 3A details the sacraments that the church recognizes, first being baptism and second being Holy Communion. Article 3B recognizes the rights that the church recognizes, including the right of ordination, the right of attaining membership, the right of holy union and holy matrimony, the right of funeral or memorial service, and the right of blessing. What this amendment does is it's going to strike all references to those rights and sacraments from the bylaws and replace it with a single statement. MCC's rights and sacraments are outlined in MCC's core documents along with the sacrament of faith. Statement of faith, thank you. So all that language is going to get struck from it there, and we just have that little blurb that I read off. They're creating the core document in this process. One of the motions will transfer the language into the core document that we're going to discuss after this. Okay? So, but that is an excellent question there. So, if we can move on to the rationale side there, basically, they are recognizing that our bylaws are a legal document that details in very legal language what the church's policies are. But putting in statements of faith, putting in statements of theology feels like we're forcing it into a legal document. So what they have been doing, this was established back in 2016, was to start the process of moving these theological statements into a separate document titled the Core Values, which could then be maintained separately. Anything put into that still needs to be voted on by the membership in the proper processes. It's not like they get freedom to just write whatever they wanted to it there. But the idea is we want the bylaws to be the legal language. We want the core values to tell people what UFMCC is, what they recognize. Yes. Yes. The 2 sacraments and the 5 rights I read off there will be completely intact in the core documents there. There is a committee who is reviewing those to decide whether we want to propose additional sacraments or additional rights to recognize. But for right now, the general consensus is these are a pretty good list. We want to maintain them. For example, one of the rights that may come up to be voted on in the future is that as a church community that recognizes members who are trans, there is many churches who have developed their own rights for adopting a new name or adopting their new gender as a way of recognizing this is their rebirth as who they are. And so that may eventually become one of our rights that we recognize, which would be wonderful, but they are continuing the committee process to determine whether that needs to be brought up for a vote. It may have to be adjusted there, but since the core documents is still saying we recognize this sacrament there, it would not be a legal problem until a disconnect happened somehow. Does that make sense there? But I get what you're saying there. And my understanding is that from a legal standpoint, the wording is sound for those purposes. But yes. Yes. So. Mhm. So this is part of the reason. Yeah. This is part of the reason why this committee was formed there, to make sure that theologically we are recognizing the very diverse nature of the membership of the UFMCC and not writing language that is unintentionally exclusionary. And at the time many of these were written there, that was a general understanding of how baptism worked there, but many of these bylaws are 40 years old. So 40, 50 years old. So that's something we want to be aware of there. But this is an ongoing process by the denomination to do a careful consideration of what rites, what sacraments we recognize, how we word them, so that we make sure that we are being an inclusive denomination. I believe they came from the denomination specifically there. I think from the commission there specifically there. Yes. I forgot to look at that, and I do apologize. I will have to look up the business notes. So, okay. Any other questions or thoughts on this? Okay. There are two motions associated with this that will probably be passed in conjunction at the same time there. The first motion is the motion that officially creates the core document that transfers the exact language from the bylaws into the core documents as written. And then we have a second motion which authorizes the incoming moderator and the governing board to reappoint the Commission on Rites and Sacraments to continue this duty of looking at this and finding more recommendations. As of right now, if the second motion doesn't pass, this committee will be done. And so, but there is, at least from what you see there is a sense that more work needs to be done there. And if you notice at the end of it there, the document that they bring forth will be required to be approved by 2/3 of the clergy house and the lay house at a special general conference in 2 years, which will be handled virtually, but it's designed, I keep on walking over, sorry. It's designed to say, we don't want this to last forever, but there's more work to be done. So at this time there, if you look at the top of your ballots, there is the two amendments, and it just says single motion, but I will understand if you want to write notation saying motion 1 yes, motion 2 no, or something like that. You are also allowed to mark unsure. If you don't have strong feelings there, feel free to mark unsure after any of these, and I will take that into consideration also. Okay. So now that we are past the legalese, let's start talking about the candidates. So just to let you know, these are the names of the current governing board, the 2 clergy members and the 2 laypersons who are continuing on in their terms. until 2028. And then the 2 clergy members and the 2 lay persons who are currently rotating off because their terms are finished. In case you're wondering, the Leo Rossetti, who's from ICM Rio. ICM is the translation of MCC into Spanish or Portuguese. So it's just MCC in those languages there. It's you're not used to seeing it, but that's what's going on. Yes, everybody on the second portion there, their terms will be officially ending at this general conference, and they have the option of rerunning, which several of them have chosen to do, but if they choose to finish their term, we thank them for their service. Okay, next slide. So there are 2 clergy candidates currently running for 2 open spots. I want to remind you, we will be voting for them separately, and each candidate does need to get better than 50% majority of the voting of the votes there to get elected. And so just because there are only 2 clergy members for 2 open spots does not guarantee that they will both end up in there. Okay. So I did put a link to the bios through the newsletter, but they're pretty short, so I'm going to quickly read them. So Reverend Marie Alford Harkey, who it says up there MCC Hartford, Connecticut, but I believe recently she has actually moved to Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. So that it was unclear. The website still lists her as being from MCC Hartford in Connecticut. Reverend Marie Alford Harkey is currently a hospice chaplain in Florida, USA. Marie was ordained a pastor in 2016. She earned her Master of Divinity at Episcopal Divinity School in 2010. She also holds a Master of Arts in French. Marie's career has always focused on social justice. As a high school teacher for 20 years, she supported LGBTQIA students by helping them to form a gay-straight alliance. After seminary, Marie worked for and then was president and CEO of a national nonprofit that worked in the areas of sexual health, education, and justice in faith communities and societies. As a pastor, Marie participated with congregates in rallies at the capital of Florida and in justice work with the local LGBTQ community center. In her current role, Marie supports patients and families at the end of life and continues to be active in social justice causes. So I actually do believe that MCC Hartford is incorrect. She is currently on the board, and she is rerunning. Reverend Renee Phillips, who from Venice, Florida, USA. Reverend Renee Phillips has served as a clergy in the Metropolitan Community Churches since 1989. She was the senior pastor of MCC of Lubbock, Texas for 23 years. After moving to Florida in 2016, she served as volunteer clergy with Suncoast MCC, as the transitional pastor of Church of the Trinity MCC, and the interim pastor of King of Peace in St. Petersburg. Reverend Phillips has served on various committees, such as the Board of Ordained Ministry, the South Central District Committee, and currently as a mentor in the Thriving in Ministry program. She lives in Venice, Florida, with Terry, her spouse of 33 years, and their cat, Gracie. That is the sum total of information I have on them right now. Yes. Oh, we're going to do it alphabetical. So clergy candidate 1 will be Marie, and clergy candidate 2 will be Renee, just in that order. I realized this after I printed off the ballots that they didn't put the people's names, and I had 40 of them already. So. Technically, yes, we vote for each of them in essence individually, and they have to get 50%. A better than 50% majority to be elected. So I have the option of voting for both, of voting for one or even voting for none. Okay. Next slide, please. So, the two layperson candidates are James Chavis, and I apologize, I'm not certain of his name there, and Charlotte West. James Chavis is currently on the governing board and is running for re-election. So, James Chavis, originally from New Jersey, James grew up in the Presbyterian Church and was ordained as an elder, leading the youth for just over 3 years. In addition, he served on the church board, serving a congregation of more than 500 members. Upon moving to Texas in 2003, James attended various MCC churches in Dallas and Fort Worth. Finally settling down in San Antonio, he found his church home at MCC San Antonio. In 2014, he became a member and began serving in the choir and helping other ministries in the church. James was appointed to the church board in 2015, still continuing to serve. He has held the position of risk manager and now vice moderator. James brings various levels of work experience, including business and human resources. Currently working in education with over 20 years experience, James has been a teacher, counselor, coordinator, director, assistant superintendent, and now superintendent of a charter school district. He currently holds a master's degree in educational administration and supervision from the University of Phoenix and a Bachelor of Science degree in management from Park University. Charlotte West, out of Northern Lights MCC, Newcastle, UK. Charlotte West was born and brought up in the UK and has attended church for most of her life. She attended a Brethren church whilst growing up. When she went to university, she attended a house church and then an Anglican. She has also attended a Baptist and then another Anglican before coming to MCC. Whilst at the Anglican, she was a member of the church council and helped the treasurer and lead the building fund, raising funds, including grants. She worked for the National Health Service as a GP practice manager during the COVID-19 pandemic before retiring in 2021. Again, the biographies are the sum total of my knowledge of these two people, other than the two who are currently on the governing board. As I said, they are rerunning there. I feel and I believe as a general rule that most membership have been pleased with how the governing board has conducted themselves. So that is information I have on the two returning members. Yes, exactly. Again, just keeping them alphabetical. And once again, I can vote for both. I can vote for one. I can vote for none if that's what the feedback from the church advises me. Okay, any other thoughts before we move on? So now we're going to move on to the moderator candidates. Moderator is elected for a 6-year term, and so one of the two candidates is our current moderator, Reverend Elder Cecilia Eggleston. She is rerunning, but we do have another candidate Craig Cranston from Fort Myers in the United States there. Again, for our purposes, in alphabetical order, Craig Cranston will be candidate A, and Reverend Elder Cecilia Eggleston will be candidate B. So, and the bylaws also state that whichever candidate gets elected must be elected with a 50% majority, and this may be one place where we may need to run additional rounds in case people choose to vote for neither and abstain, and they don't get the majority they're looking for, because we need a moderator. So that's one of those things that they'll keep trying for. but after 3 rounds, they will stop regardless of whether a moderator has been elected or not. So, if we can switch to the next slide, I will read the biography for Reverend Craig Cranston, and then we will play his introduction video. Since this is important enough, I feel it's important we get all the information. So, Reverend Craig Cranston was affirmed and unanimously elected as the senior pastor of St. John the Apostle MCC in September 2022. Prior to being called to this congregation, Reverend Craig was assistant pastor at MCC Tampa and served as the pastor of congregational care at King of Peace MCC. Graduating with honors from the Elith School of Theology in Denver with his Master in Divinity degree, Reverend Craig comes to ordained ministry after several years as a consultant and business leader to several Fortune 200 companies. He is certified as a marriage and family facilitator through Prepare Enrich, leads workshops on several topics in both religious and secular spaces, and is a member of the Pi Alpha Theta National Honor Society. Reverend Craig, as the co-leader of the Florida Network, mobilized MCC churches from around Florida in 2022 in response to the hateful Don't Say Gay legislation, rallying together with other leadership over 60 MCCers to protest in Tallahassee. Through this work, Reverend Craig continued in building strategic relationships with key stakeholders throughout the state in responding to legislative initiatives that demean the LGBTQ community. Utilizing his extensive finance experience, Reverend Craig serves as the treasurer on the National Board of Pensions for the clergy of the denomination. He also serves as a director with Visuality, a local LGBTQ support and service center in Fort Myers. Reverend Craig is also the vice president of the Interfaith Alliance of Southwest Florida, a group of various faith traditions fighting the rise of Christian nationalism. Reverend Craig, following the devastation of Hurricane Ian in 2022, marshaled resources for the local church and community, raising $20,000 in 2 days for those in need, while working with statewide partners to collect and then provide much-needed supplies for the larger community. St. John the Apostle MCC was able to feed and provide for over 300 families within 5 days of the hurricane. Under Reverend Craig's leadership, despite 3 hurricanes, crushing economic burdens, and a legacy of hateful legislation trying to erase the promise of Florida's diverse LGBTQ community, St. John the Apostle MCC continues to grow, with more young people joining the church in the past year than ever before. So, if we can start the introduction video. And wait for the ad. And I do thank our tech person for working with this. There have been a series of candidate webinars. Those are the last ones that will be held. So.
Greetings, MCC. I'm Reverend Craig Cranston, and what an honor and a privilege it is for me to come before you today. I know this video is about you getting to know me a little bit better. I hope you'll read my bio, which is on the website and talks about my business and academic and ministry background. But I want to use our time today to talk a little bit about my vision for MCC, where I honored to be elected as moderator. And it really boils down to 2 themes: support and innovation. I'd start by raising $500,000, and anybody that knows me knows I know how to raise some money. And I would use that money in 2 particular ways. First, I would visit every MCC church across the globe within my first 2 years. It's important that the moderators show up and that you know you're important and you're supported. Second, I would use the rest of that money to support you in profound ways. Here's an example. Let's say you have a part-time pastor because you can't afford a full-time pastor. Well, the denomination can step in with that money and we can meet the gap between the two so your pastor can be full-time and help to grow that church. Together with the Council of Elders, I want to create opportunities to support networks in profound ways. And I want to create an innovation team by raising at $5 million to start not just supporting our existing churches, but then to go and start planting churches. We have got to start growing our church, and we need to start planting churches, and we need to start resourcing those in profound ways. We need to create a top-of-mind awareness so that everybody in America and abroad no longer thinks of MCC as the best-kept secret. They need to think about us when they think about LGBTQ and other areas of social justice. We need to create positive, affirming, and supportive, expansive opportunities for our clergy. They've been doing tireless work for years, and we need to create opportunities to support them. And part of that would be to expand the Flourish program. So things like sabbaticals are things they can do without having to worry. You know, there are so many things that I would do. And I hope that my idea, just briefly sharing with you about support and about innovation, gives you a flavor, just a taste of where I would head were I to be elected moderator. The hard truth is that our denomination over the last 10 years have been in substantial decline. We have 91 churches in the U.S., and almost 30% of those 91 churches have 25 or fewer members. And we have a growing list of congregations that don't have a seated pastor. Those are dangerous numbers for us. We've got to start turning the tide. And there are those in our denomination who believe that the time for MCC is over, that we're no longer relevant, but I don't believe that. I believe we've practiced for 55 years the very things that a new spirituality demand. Our world now more than ever is in need of healing and a constant reminder of a gospel of love and radical inclusion. We need to be a prophetic voice that counteracts the religious voices of hatred that love to sing a song of restriction, because God in Jesus Christ produces for all of us a harmony of liberation. We need to rise up as a chorus to declare the joyous good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ for all people. Reverend Elder Troy Perry, in his book, Don't Be Afraid Anymore, recounts how in 1972 at our third general conference, he was getting ready to ordain Jim Sandemeyer, and Jim was preaching that day, and he said in his sermon, and I quote, "God would desire that we stop talking about going out of business and start actually being the new prophetic voice to the world." I believe that now is the time for our prophetic voice to rise and ring loudly across every continent in proclaiming the good news of God. I believe that now is the time for a new movement to sweep across MCC and boldly declare our presence and our commitment to radical hospitality, to embrace and welcome everyone into our churches. I believe that now is the time for a revival and a renewal of MCC that goes beyond what even we might dream or imagine. I hope that you're going to join me in what I believe the Holy Spirit is calling all of us into: a new time, a new season, and a new hope for MCC. Blessings to you all.
Yes. He said he would fundraise it. And in his bio, we acknowledge that he has some experience with fundraising, such as running 2,000.
Watch what smoothies do to our body.
Are smoothies a good option?
Okay, let's try that again. So he did mention that he was able to raise $20,000 in a very, very short time in hurricane relief funds, and that, I think he mentioned other fundraising tactics that he might have done there. I will point out that when I was watching some of the webinars that he presented there, he has big ideas. It was unclear the details. So, and that is my honest impression of him there. There's a lot about him to like, but it was hard to get him to commit to any full details, and that is my concern. So, okay. Let us talk about Reverend Elder Cecilia Eggleston. Cecilia Eggleston has been passionately involved in MCC for 35 years, starting as a young LGBT activist who helped to plant a local church. She was elected as European District Coordinator and as Regional Elder, serving our churches in Western Europe and Africa. She served as local church pastor at Northern Lights MCC, Newcastle upon Tyne, England, for 9 years, raising the profile of the church within the local community and developing a monthly family service. During her tenure as pastor, Northern Lights MCC was presented with the Moderator's Award for the church's work with LGBT asylum seekers. Reverend Cecilia is one of the few MCC leaders who has served at a denominational level with both Reverend Troy Perry and Reverend Elder Nancy Wilson as moderators, learning from them both about what it means to lead a global movement and international denomination. Since 2019, she has served as the moderator of UFMCC, guiding MCC through the global COVID pandemic. Under her leadership, the denomination has become financially stable, with an endowment fund and a grant for $500,000 from the Lilly Foundation to develop and support current and future leaders through the Flourish program. Reverend Elder Eggleston delights in building up people and seeking them grow. She has worked as a teacher, a trainer, a community development worker, and a community facilitator. She is a trained spiritual director and loves holy listening, holding that sacred space so that individuals can hear the voice of the Holy Spirit within their own lives. She is trained in consensus building and has worked with the staff, governing board, council of elders, and local church leaders to develop a common vision, published in 2022, and an ongoing strategic plan, including actions to address racial inequality, which work towards that vision. Although she is an extrovert and has plenty of energy, she is spiritually a contemplative, needing silence and stillness to feed her soul. Quiet time every morning and time set aside for retreat are important ways for her to keep spirituality healthy. Family is important to Reverend Elder Eggleston. She was born in Sheffield in the north of England, the sixth child of 7. She has an enormous number of relatives and enjoys spending time with all the different generations. She currently lives in North Somerset, England, where she enjoys watching the birds in the garden and learning Tai Chi.
I'm Reverend Elder Cecilia Eggleston, and I'm delighted and honoured to be a candidate for moderator. Things have changed a lot, haven't they, since July 2019, and MCC has changed too. We've learned so much about the power of online ministry and the importance of maintaining connection. We've been able to zap around the world in time and space using Zoom. Thanks to your faithful generosity and the excellent stewardship of the MCC staff and the governing board, MCC is now financially stable, and we have money for leadership development, for digital ministry, to support churches when they're struggling through our disaster relief fund, and in so many other ways we are resourcing local churches. And it's been a tough 6 years. The pandemic has left us exhausted in still some ways, and yet there is still so much for us to do, and I am so excited about that. The world needs more MCC. Around the world we can see right-wing politics on the rise, hateful religious rhetoric, LGBT rights being eroded or not even being there in the first place. Racism, misogyny, transphobia, homophobia. These things are all on the rise, and we are a powerful voice to counteract that. We are a powerful voice to offer an alternative of life with the divine. So we need to develop more faith communities with inspiring, encouraging leaders that we can support and resource well. We need to have funding to ensure that those communities have a strong foundation. And it may be working in partnership with a local church. It may be focusing on a specific area and pouring our resources into that. And that's a conversation for us to have. It's going to look different in different places around the world because it's important that we are culturally appropriate and sensitive. We need to continue to raise up our lay leaders, equip and empower them, and have spiritual development programs for the laity, as well as continuing the work that Flourish does, encouraging, supporting and empowering our clergy and our lay leaders in ministry. We need to find more ways of sharing our fantastic queer spirituality. We have so many brilliant theologians in MCC, and I want to find ways of raising them up. I'd love for MCC to publish an LGBTQIA prayer book. Wouldn't that be fantastic? There are things that we need to do still to resource our local congregations, the ones that are thriving and can share what they are learning, the ones that are struggling and need more resources. I want us to have a much better online resource bank so that it's easily accessible, that it's multilingual, there's everything there from worship resources, certificates, right through to training programs for anti-racism, for anti-oppression work, so that every single person in MCC can find what they're looking for easily. I want us to do more to create the partnerships that we're redeveloping so that MCC is connected on the world stage with other denominations and other organisations, offering justice at the margins and working with those who want to be raised up and want their voices to be heard. We're already doing some of that, but we need to do more. And of course, we need to have a serious discussion about how our local congregations can be financially stable and have everything they need to do their ministry, and also that we have enough to provide a denominational structure which is flexible, which is cost effective, and is able to support and provide resources for those local congregations and local church leaders so that you thrive and have everything that you need. Now, so much is happening in the world where progressive Christianity needs to be a powerful voice. I feel in so many ways that the best is yet to come for MCC. And I am delighted and honoured to serve in whatever way I can to make our collective vision a reality, for there to be thriving MCCs around the world, a growing number of active, faithful, organised, deeply spiritual people who are transforming the world as we are transformed ourselves. Because, as we know, it takes all of us to be MCC. God bless.
I had the privilege of meeting Reverend Elder Cecilia Eggleston 2 years ago when she visited the network gathering we were having in Kansas City, Missouri. She is exactly as you see her in that video. She is genuine. She has this grace about her that, I mean, you talk to her and it doesn't matter who you are, she listens. And I tried to present most of this as unbiased as possible there, but I believe personally that she is a good leader for the denomination. And she has led us through some challenging times there when she took over in 2019. The denomination was almost bankrupt. It had been rocked by a series of scandals that had shook the faith of many of the churches, including our own. We actually had a congregational meeting to question whether we should stay in the MCC, and she took on that mantle there, and I believe she shouldered that responsibility amazingly well there, and I think she turned the course around there. The financial well-being of the denomination is in much better straits. She, even 4 years into her term when I met her, she was walking around recognizing that there were still people who were hurt by those scandals, and that she was listening, and she was offering her sincere apologies for the hurt there, despite the fact she wasn't moderator at the time. And just that humility, that sense of care shown through everything she did. So I know I'm supposed to be unbiased there, but it's really hard not to. So once again, to remind you, candidate A is Reverend Craig, candidate B is Reverend Cecilia, and you are, of course, allowed to vote unsure if you wish. If you are uncertain if you want to turn in this ballot to me today, I'm pretty much here every Sunday, so feel free to come by and talk with me and give me your opinion then. If I am ever not here, there's going to be one Sunday 2 weeks from now when I won't be. Just get it to Alicia Hayes, and she will get it to me. I trust her. I didn't talk to her about this first, but I figured she would. Okay. If we'll just put up the last slide. Any last questions, thoughts, opinions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Looking over the financials that they released, the denomination is in stable financial shape. I'm not going to pretend that a bad event couldn't cause problems, but that's true for almost any place there. considering where we were in 2019, where they were on the verge of bankruptcy, and they were relying very, very heavily on church tithes, which many of the churches were having struggle meeting them. They were having to lay off people right and left. The fact that we are now in this position there where they are able to hire new staff members strategically. They have an endowment fund, which they're hoping to grow to the point there where it can supplement income for the denomination there, so they are less reliant on tithes. I think the characterization that the church is financially in decline is incorrect. Yes. Yes. And the reality is, if you look at any denomination there, they are all experiencing a similar issue of having trouble keeping churches open, keeping membership open up there. That doesn't mean we can't turn it around there. I believe, and I think you all here believe, that MCC has a message that needs to be heard that should appeal to people. But the big question that almost every church is going to have to answer in the next decade is what do we do to transition from that traditional model that used to work for churches to become a church of the modern era? And I don't have an answer for that. I think a lot of people have ideas, and it will be trial and error to figure out what works there. And so Reverend Craig was absolutely right that with his statistics about the number of churches with fewer than 25 members, we have observed in the state of Colorado alone there, when I joined MCC, we had 4 active churches. We are now down to 2, and I am seriously concerned for the health of Denver. I'll be blunt. I don't know if they're going to continue or not, but I am seriously concerned from them. So potentially it could be we are Colorado's church. So there are going to be a lot of tough conversations, and whoever the moderator is going to have them and figure it out and provide the guidance to the local churches for what they could do there. I think we learned a lot in the pandemic. I think video outreach, as odd as it would have been to us before the pandemic, may actually be a great way to reach people, but we will have to see. Mhm. They have hired somebody to be a part-time pastor. He works on pastoral work for 8 hours a week. He is their business manager for the remaining 32 hours. He might have left since the last time. Yeah, because he was having trouble making ends meet there. But at least at the last network gathering, I talked to him and that. And so they've been struggling for a while. So yes. So I thank you all for attending. I know I tried to keep it short here, but there's only so much I can do with one of these. I appreciate your feedback. I will take your feedback and prayerfully consider it before I make my voting decision in June.
Thanks, John.
July, actually June is when the vote happens. Yeah, the